So today we're going to continue on in Acts 12. We're going to do the whole chapter, sorry. Now chapter 12 starts with, and I'm going to read it here in a second, but it says, "Now about that time." So an explanation on what that time they are referring to. So we have to go back to chapter 11 to see what time this is. 11 verse 28 says, "Agabus stood up and said that there was going to be a great famine throughout the world, which also happened in the days of Claudius Caesar." He was ruler of Rome at the time. He was born August 1st, 10 BC and died October 13th, 54 AD. His full name was Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. Now, that took up almost a whole line on my page here. He reigned in Rome from January of 41 BC to October of 54 BC. As the fourth Roman emperor following Caligula, he had a son named Nero, who was not a very nice guy, and he was in charge of Rome. So the verse we're going to read next happened during the famine worldwide that happened during Claudius's reign. So if you read along with me, it should be up there. New International Version. "It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who had belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. When he saw that this met with the approval among the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. That night, before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. 'Quick, get up,' he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, 'Put on your clothes and sandals,' and Peter did so. 'Wrap your cloak around you and follow me,' the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through. When they had walked to the length of the one street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, 'Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent the angel to rescue me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen.' When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, 'Peter is at the door.' 'You are out of your mind,' they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said, 'It must be his angel.' But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door, they saw him. They were astonished. Peter motioned them with his hand to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. 'Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this,' he said, and then he left for another place. In the morning there was no small commotion among the soldiers, so that as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed. Then Herod went from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there. He had been quarreling with the people of Tyre and Sidon, and now joined together and sought an audience with him. After securing the support of Blastus, a trusted personal servant of the king, they asked for peace, because they depended on the king's country for their food supply. On the appointed day, Herod, wearing his royal robes, sat in the throne, delivered a public address, and the people, they shouted, 'This is the voice of a God and not of a man.' Immediately, Because Herod did not give praise to God, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died. But the word of God continued to spread and flourish. When Barnabas and Saul had finished their mission, they returned from Jerusalem, taking with them John, also called John Mark. Okay, now the last verse on that is actually part of 13, but it counts it as part of this, and it'll have part in the sermon today. Okay, so what I'd like to do is to break down each section, kind of go through and explain what each section means. And after dividing them up, we'll look at each of them, and then another part on the whole, somewhat of a summary. We'll see if we can tie this up and make sense of it. So we talked about Claudius before we read. Now the first part of the verse, we have Herod. This is Herod Agrippa, grandson of Herod the Great. Now Herod the Great was the one that was trying to kill all the babies when Jesus was born, the one with the 3 wise men. So that was his grandfather. Herod Agrippa spent his childhood and youth in the imperial court of Rome, where he befriended the imperial princes Claudius and Drusus. He and Claudius were born within a year of each other, and one commentary I read this week said that Herod Agrippa was instrumental in Claudius becoming emperor. I guess there was something that happened with Drusus, and Herod was part of it. So Herod was the last Jewish king of Judea and reigned from 41 to 44 AD. This narrows that window down that we were looking at. Up top we were looking at 41 to 54. Now we're looking 41 to 44 for this actually occurring. His son Herod Agrippa II was the last of the Herodian dynasty, reigning areas and outside of Judea as a Roman client. So he was a ruler, but he wasn't in Judea. So we know that this occurs between 41 and 44 AD, and knowing that Herod dies later in the story, spoiler alert, it occurs in 44 AD. So after a brief history lesson covering the first line of chapter 12, Luke tells us what Herod was doing at the time. He, Herod, stretched forth his hands to oppress and torment those who belonged to the church. Jesus said in Matthew 24, verse 9, Mark 13, verse 9, and Luke 21, verse 12 and 13, during the Sermon on the Mount, there's 3 accounts of it, he said that his followers will be hated because of him, to the point of being put to death, which is what we see in verse 2 with James, the brother of John. This James was with Peter and John and saw Jesus taking up to heaven at the Transfiguration.